Welcome to Bird Burger. How crucial is your editing in your wildlife photography? There's varying opinions between editing needing to be the driving point of an image and largely manipulating the way something looked from out in the field, all the way to the belief that post-processing shouldn't exist at all. I think that before making a judgment, it's important to understand the reasons for editing, how to do it, and how you can shoot with editing in mind. Today, I'm honored to be joined by wildlife photographer Andrew MacDonald, safari extraordinaire and expert wildlife photographer. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, Jeremy. Thanks very much for having me back on for another podcast.
Yep, most definitely. I'm super excited to have you back. You're definitely one of the people that I keep in contact with the most. We talk about stuff all the time, like this. And so super excited to have you on and get to talk about editing today and how we can kind of transform, the way we edit and different styles and techniques and all that good stuff. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to seeing what the different opinions are in the comments afterwards as well.
Yeah, see how much we get roasted. Yep. Yep. So yeah, we're going to start getting into some techniques towards editing in different styles soon. But just to kind of talk about this first, I guess, editing is very powerful. It can literally alter the way that you see an image and massively change what you see as a viewer from what was actually photographed, right? So for this reason, editing historically received maybe like some kind of bad rap or not good at truly representing what was photographed on set. But I think that recently knowledge has maybe progressed in the general population of wildlife photographers to become a little bit more open to the idea of post-processing. But there are some specific ways in which people are repelled by it. I mean, for example, even the morning of filming this podcast, I woke up and I just woke up to a thread of comments from some guy just roasting me about using Topaz, for all my images. So some people are definitely still very repelled by the idea of much manipulation going on in editing at all. What is your personal opinion on this, and what do you do to work to achieve an editing style for yourself?
Yeah, I'm very much for editing, and thinking about it actually way back in the days when people were using dark rooms in film, they were still doing different techniques to get different results, which in a way was sort of post-processing, But for me, I've always considered the camera and the raw file. Raw file is something that's sort of a flatter image when it's capturing as much data as it can. I've always considered that as like a starting point. So like the camera is a tool to get you a starting point, which gives you something that then you go and express your personal style onto the photograph. So you could have, you probably done it recently, you did the people editing your photographs. So give two people the same photograph, and then the two different styles of editing can produce two completely different results, which is something that I quite like and excites me.
Yeah.
With regarding my own photography, I love to try and capture like emotive atmospheric images. I want them to be sort of soft in all the right places, but then sharp in the right places. And obviously I try and bridge like a gap between the viewer and the actual animal or the subject at the same time. Try and if there's like an emotive scene, I want you to feel that sort of emotion, and that can be done a lot through your editing.
Yeah, most definitely. I love that. Yeah, it's less conventional, than the original dark rooms that we were looking at. It's much more powerful and much more adaptable. But yeah, that's always something good to kind of bring up. Is this has kind of always been in the history of camera work, essentially the art of camera work, and sometimes it can be thought of as like, oh, this is something that's new, and now it's ruining the art of photography. But even in the origins of it, there were different styles and ways in which people process those images, just like you said. Yeah, so exactly. I love you bringing that up. Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios in which we can use kind of creative imagery that can make an edit look very different from what is shot naturally. So for example, even if you think about it from this sense, like black and white is very widely actually accepted as like being an okay, right, like type of post-processing technique. But yet that's not really how the scene naturally would look to our eyes to most of us, I guess, unless we're colorblind. And I don't even know what colorblind people are necessarily seeing, because I haven't experienced that personally. But to most of us, that's not even actually what we would be seeing. So there's things like that, right, that could be very heavily creatively manipulated. But there's also things that can be very heavily creatively manipulated and still look very natural. I love that you were bringing up the people who are editing my video, and I sent it out to a bunch of people recently, and they all gave me their photos back. One of the photos that had a lot of them edited up was the oyster catcher image, and when I took my original image of that one, I took a silhouette of the oyster catcher and this wave coming over the back, and I felt like when I was viewing that image, I was like, this needs to be a very just blue and black image, because this is kind of the perception of what it felt like out in nature, right? So even though that's not exactly what I captured with my camera, it didn't come out that blue. There were some other colors in the mix. It felt that way, so I edited it to look that way, and it still looks very natural, at least in my opinion. Can you explain maybe a little bit of maybe some styles or examples or processes that you have to make images maybe look pretty creatively different from what was originally taken, like you said, that raw file, but still look pretty natural?
I mean, it's sort of like a can of worms, that question. You could go on and on, but I'd say, I don't actually think I do too much to my pictures which is completely removed from the scene that I saw. Like the biggest one I would do is probably making them black and white monochrome for doing like fine art prints. I think they look really nice in print when they're black and white. But and then apart from that, I'll do things like I'll remove small distractions from an image, but I would never be somebody to add subjects. I would never add an extra thing to a picture unless you're going to disclaim it, which is another fine line which we could get roasted for in the comments. As far as my images go, I like to make them quite flat, and then I bring back certain areas of the image that I want to draw attention to afterwards. I know that I know it's not wildlife, but if I'm doing like real estate photography, I might do a sky replacement just if I didn't get the right nice conditions I wanted at the time. But with wildlife, I've never done anything like sky replacements or added any subjects that weren't actually there at the original scene. So I think what I'm actually doing when I'm editing is I'm trying to just recapture the scene that I saw in front of me and how it made me feel at the same time, like you were saying. And as you're shooting, you've also got an idea in your head exactly how you're going to edit a picture. Sometimes you're shooting and you just know exactly what you're going to do. If I'm shooting a line and there's this beautiful sort of side light coming in, and I already know what I'm going to do. I'm like, I'm going to darken this. I'm going to add a filter here, and I'm bringing enhance the light coming in here. But nothing that would not be there in the scene in the first place. So it's difficult to answer that one because I don't really do anything crazy to my photographs, in my opinion. Yeah, for sure. Even what you were saying though, like adding in maybe those, I don't know if you're using gradient filters or radial filters to do those kind of light techniques, but those are so powerful and those can make such a big difference. But they're very subtle. Not too crazy, but it just kind of accents what you feel like you're kind of seeing in that scene, which is that intense, light coming from the side of the frame or whatever it may be. So, I love that. It's still something you can overdo. Normally what I'll do is I zoom out to like 12%, so it's small, so I can get a better. You can it stops you from overdoing it if you zoom way out and just see it as like a thumbnail, and you adjust it from that sort of angle, and then once you come back and it looks a bit more natural. It's almost like adding a heavy vignette, but not to the whole picture. Add it to maybe 2 or 3 sides, and then have a light coming in from one side.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned something really good there. Do you typically, how do you kind of edit in terms of what's your kind of view typically on your photo? Like you mentioned backing out to 12%, right? Do you typically edit like pretty full size and then, maybe just sprinkle in some of that zooming out, or do you typically edit from a further back standpoint, or what does that look like for you?
So I'll start with this normal. I'll start normal, and I'd sort of normally take away contrast and drop highlights, raise shadows. I make the image like super flat, and then I'll use a little bit of software called Topaz to do some work after there. And then after that, that's when I sort of that's when I'll zoom out to 12%, so I can add sort of my directions of light where I want things to come from, and then from there I'll go in and do like selective contrast adding, and when I'm doing that I can be zooming into like 300, depends how intense I want to go. If it's if it's an elephant with super wrinkly skin and I only want to get those dark shadows, I'll just go right into the skin and just lots of mouse and just adding the darks where I want them, the lights where I want them, especially if you're doing lots of details on the eye and you're trying to just enhance the catch light on the eyes. I'll be zoomed way in on there and just emphasizing certain areas that I want to emphasize.
Yeah, I'm also constantly doing a lot of that back out pull in in my editing, because they give you very different perspectives. And I think that something that's really nice is when you're able to see an image more full size, maybe at 50 to 100% pixel, to screen ratio, or forget whatever the the technical name for that is. But when you're able to see it much bigger, right, you're able to see those details and see what you really want to pick out, and you're able to line up your compositions nicely and all that stuff. But if you don't pull back to that 12%, 20% like we're talking about, a lot of times it's so big that it's easy to isolate those subjects and like kind of lock your eye onto things. But when you pull back, it's very easy to notice if your image is too cluttered, like if there's, not a good overall aesthetic going on. So I love that you mentioned that you do that.
You can pull back, or even if you kind of squint your eyes, you'll see the lighter areas in the image where your eye's drawn to as well. It sort of helps a little bit too. And I'll always edit a picture, disappear for, I don't know, it can just be 10-15 minutes, then come back and look again, or I can leave it for a day or two. It's always important. Sometimes you come back and you're like, yeah, it's good, but sometimes you're like, whoa, what was it?
What was I thinking?
Are way off. White balance is completely wrong, or something,
Yeah. Yep.
It's always
That's
good. I never like edit, export, post. I would never, because it's just. Yeah. You might notice mistakes if you do that. It's always good to come back to it.
Yeah.
And then you've got the hassle of exporting it, putting it on your iPhone or your phone. You're like, it looks nothing like on my computer screen. That's a whole another world. Everyone's looking at your image on a different monitor with different calibrations, different phones, different brightnesses. So you can never guarantee your image is actually going to be seen how you want it to be seen on everybody else's monitors.
Yep, that's a whole deep conversation. Yeah. Just as a quick touch up on that, a lot of times for most people who are editing in Lightroom or Lightroom-like programs, you're wanting to look for a monitor. When you're looking for a computer monitor, you're wanting to look for something that has a high sRGB percentage value. So that's typically what you're wanting to look for. But yeah, like you said, you can never control the exact, I guess, what was it? The exact ways that people are viewing it, and the screens that they're viewing it on, and all that stuff. But something you said that was really cool was the squinting. I've never tried that before, so I'll have to try that out next time I'm editing. So
it can work. It can help just a bit, just to make sure your eyes will be drawn to the brighter areas, and
Yep. I'm kind of always naturally doing that because of the Korean side of me, so I'm always kind of naturally squinting anyways, but yeah. I love all that. There's a big difference. I like to call it subtractive versus additive techniques in your wildlife photography. Subtractive being more like removing just subtle distractions, whether that might be, anything from a dust spot to something like maybe a twig that accidentally got into the frame, versus additive, which might be something more like replacing a sky, or adding in a subject in the background, stuff like that. Subtractive, I think, is much more widely adopted, it's still fringe for a lot of people, right? But it's like becoming more accepted.
Yeah, it can be fringe, but to me, there's nothing wrong with tidying up a little bit. You can even tidy up by cropping. You can just crop something to remove a distractive thing from the edge of a frame or whatever. Crop it, so that's surely that can't be frowned upon too much. But I'll remove things if there's. It's very rare where I shoot in Africa. There's very rarely anything man-made in the background. But if there was something, I would probably just remove it. If it was like, so I've done it a couple of times where there's been one blade of grass right in front of an eye, which is a tricky thing to remove. But if I've removed things like that just to really, to me, it adds to the picture. Remove small things and it adds to the image and doesn't detract from the actual scene that was there in the first place.
So what are I'd love to ask you this question: what are maybe two different features or techniques that you use that might be a little bit more niche that could dramatically change the edits of some people who might be watching and wanting to learn some stuff about editing?
Regarding for me, so what I said at the start is making my image as flat as possible, and then I go into the Topaz side of things, and I'll just as soon as you know that software, to me it's not cheating, it just works wonders and clears up an image, which is when you're trying to do denoise and stuff in Lightroom, the results are nowhere near as good as using the Topaz. It just gets, and I still it's to me it's not something where I know there was that software Luminar AI, I think it was, and that was people were just popping a picture on there and clicking a thing, and it was adding sun rays, it was adding skies, adding all the different light everywhere. Which to me that was taking away from people having their sort of expressive opinion. It was like, here's what your picture should like, and people were like, oh, it looks cool.
Yep.
So to me, I still use Topaz to get me to a baseline. That's my starting point. It's just I'm tidying up my raw file, and then from there I'm then going and doing the rest, which is, you know, enhancing the direction of light, going in and selecting small areas to add contrast and highlights and shadows, just to emphasize certain areas in an image that I want to really draw the attention of a viewer to. For me, the most effective one, and I've said it like 6 times now, is just using the radials and the gradients just to really enhance where your eye is drawn to in a picture.
Yeah.
Like sometimes when I do that and I just click the before and after, it's just crazy how much it just
dramatic.
draws the eye to exactly where you want it in the frame.
Yeah.
And it can be, you know, sometimes it's the light was actually really intense in the scene, so you don't have to do very much to it at all, but sometimes it was like maybe an overcast cloudy day, but the light was still coming from a particular direction. You just want to enhance that a little bit just to bring it back a bit.
Yeah, I love that. That's good.
But it's definitely important. It's important to make sure you do it in the right direction, because if you have like a shadow falling this way, you end up doing your radial from the wrong.
Looks so weird.
I edited a bee eater shot a few weeks ago. It was a beautiful bee eater on this branch, and I added all this stuff, finished the image, and I was like, the light's coming from the wrong side here, so I had to redo the whole thing. Yeah, it's just crazy. You just have to keep an eye on where your shadows are in the actual direction of light. I was just in a zone, and I'd done my last picture with the same angles, so I was just like doop, 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 and then realized the shadows were all wrong for the direction of light.
Yeah, most definitely. That's good. I love that. Yeah, something that's funny is I'm a huge believer in those Topaz products, right? And even things like sharpen that can just help slightly correct that, you know, not missed focus towards like completely, right? But just, you know, slightly out of focus or things like that, slightly blurry images. I think that it's interesting when people are so against that. Yet autofocus, I mean, even the concept of autofocus in general is taking your ability and skill set away from you and giving it to a computer, so a computer can worry about it rather than you while you're out in the field, right? So like, rather than everyone manual focusing and trying to tack manual focus, autofocus is making your job like 1,000 times easier already, and it's a computer system that's doing that for you. And so in the same similar way, Topaz is doing the same thing, right? Where it's just taking something and just helping correct it a little bit through a computer generated program, right? And especially for someone like me, who I'm shooting manual focus all the time, it just helps me get that slight, you know, amount of correction if I can. So
yeah, exactly. And like I say, I use it to get to me, it's a tool to get to the baseline, and then you can do all your expressive work afterwards in the edit.
Most definitely. I love that. I think, one of those other benefits is about editing is it really helps to bring out the uniqueness of you as a wildlife photographer and your style, and help isolate your style and set it apart from others, right? There are some like people that I can recognize their work as soon as I see it without even seeing a name, for example, just because I know that the way they edit, and I know how unique those edits are and all that stuff. Do you have kind of an editing style, would you say, to your photography? And if so, how would you kind of define your style?
I would say I do have a bit of a style that I've taken from maybe different photographers over the years. I would define it as, I like to think of it as being sort of eye-catching, emotive, atmospheric is what I like to sort of think of it as. But if I scroll down my Instagram feed, even just like, you know, last year, my style, it's sort of something that I seem to always constantly evolve. And sometimes I'll look back at edits that I did maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm like, I was actually doing a bit better then, because I've just got into like maybe too much of a flow, and I'm not concentrating enough on certain things, so I'll reevaluate myself and then make sure I'm making a better job. But I would say for me, I do have a bit of a style. Hopefully it's one that people seem to enjoy, but and I have taken things from, you know, different people over the years. I've just looked at images and wondered how they've achieved certain things, and then tried to implement different people's stuff into my work. And as you know, in a world where so many people are now photographers, it's sort of the editing part which now is defining people and making you stand out from other people. You know, when maybe, I don't know how many years ago, 20, 30 years ago, when not so many people had cameras, if you were the guy with the camera taking the shots, you were the one that was recognized.
Yeah.
But now I think everybody's got cameras. You know, if I'm on safari, if I'm on a lion sighting or something, there might be another vehicle with 6 people taking photographs. Yep. So you need to figure out a way for you to express how you saw the scene, and every single person, all 6 photographers, might end up having completely different results through the sort of editing process.
Yeah, I love that. That's some great insight there. I feel like even when I view your work, a lot of those words you just used to describe yourself, I would agree. Like that's how I kind of view your work as well. Very atmospherical, like you said. When I see your work, often I think of very much like fine art in a lot of them, because they feel very, very sharp, very, what you said, kind of like eye-catching. Like there's just those certain parts of the frame that just pull you in and grab you, and that's a lot due to your use of like how you manipulate light in your editing and stuff like that. And so, there's definitely a style that I see on your photography as well.
It's strange that I actually very, very rarely post any of my black and white edits, but I actually sometimes prefer them so much more. But I've just kept the color sort of pictures on my feed. But I always think that for me, when I see a black and white picture, for some reason it adds a bit more emotion, and it adds a bit more of an atmospheric feel, which is why I think black and white images seem to sell a lot better for me personally. As opposed to anything coloured. But it's just maybe if I had a feed on Instagram which was purely black and white, I think it would be even more, not saying recognisable, but it would be far more like of a emotive sort of atmospheric feed than the colour one. Plus, you know, I do a lot of landscapes, so my feed's random nowadays anyway. But I think the days of an Instagram feed having to be a certain aesthetic are sort of slowly gone now, where people are just posting random stuff. It's not, you know, you've got reels mixed up with photographs, whereas it used to be about all your colours on a grid matching all the time and flowing through seasons or whatever. But I don't think people are too fussed for that stuff nowadays. But I have thought about doing a feed with just black and white, but I just can't be bothered to start another one. There's already too much.
There's already too much to manage. So how would you kind of recommend for anyone who's watching and maybe wanting to kind of find a style of their own, how would you recommend searching for a style of editing in your photo work?
Well, I think when I was starting out, if you've never used like Lightroom and stuff before, I was just literally putting my picture in there, sliding the sliders all the way to the right, all the way to the left, seeing what it did to the picture, and then gradually learning what the actual basic things are in the first place. And then, from there you end up with probably at the start some extremely over-edited pictures, way too much saturation, way too much contrast, way too much everything.
Amen.
But I think there's huge value in if you've got a photographer where you like. I've done it myself a couple of times. I've done a couple of landscape online tutorials with a person. I've done a wildlife one, and I learned so much from that. But it doesn't mean that you then have to go and copy somebody's style. To me, it's like there was parts of his picture, and I knew this guy was achieving something in his photography, and I was like, I know all the rest of it, but there's this one thing he's doing that I just can't put my finger on that I want to achieve in some of my work. So I did his online course and then implemented that into my work. But then from his course, then I just kept my own sort of style and still added my own things into it. But I took a small piece or 2 or 3 things from his class and then implemented it into my style as well. So if people have got photographers that they admire and follow and they do that sort of thing, then it's definitely a great way to sort of speed up your learning process instead of just trying to watch YouTube videos and messing around in Lightroom by yourself. I love what you said there is just pulling the sliders back and forth, just playing with it, testing it. I think that that's really like that's huge, right? I mean, both those 2 things that you said, learning from other people, like taking like a more comprehensive, complete in one area course is super powerful. But also just that playing with it, because like over time you kind of learn, you kind of just learn what things are doing through trial and error of seeing it 1,000 times. If you slide this slider back and forth 1,000 times, you're gonna feel like you have a way, way, way better understanding of it than if it's your first time doing that, right? And so that's like something, for example, like I decided like a couple years ago, I really wanted to understand tone curves and make sure that my tone curves, like I had the ability to use those to manipulate my image however I wanted. And so I started diving into that.
and just really just working with it, messing with it, seeing what every little thing did as I moved it across that whole thing. And just through playing it with it over a lot of period of time, like I got to where like I feel like I'm pretty good at it now. But it took a couple months for sure to feel like I knew everything about that.
Exactly,
so yeah, it's a lot of trial and error.
The more you develop your style, the more of it when you're taking pictures in the field, you know what you want to do with a picture when you get home, sort of thing.
Yep.
But, like it all comes with practice and messing around with Lightroom and cameras, and so hopefully it's all good fun. It's a good fun to learn. The process is actually fun, you know.
Yep, most definitely. I love that.
Just thinking when you're speaking about tones, I was just thinking about a way that you can edit a picture which wasn't as you saw. So sometimes I do go into, you know, the sliders, what's it called again? When you can
HSL.
change the saturation, HSL. So I go into the HSL and I might adjust the hue of some tones. I don't always like, sometimes the greens get way too punchy, so I like to just drop the luminosity in there, a little bit of the saturation out of the greens. I'm more likely to remove saturation from a picture than I am to add it. If I've got a nice picture of a silhouette and a sunset, I'll maybe add some saturations to the oranges and yellows. But quite often with the greens and stuff in an image, I quite like to bring them down so that the line or whatever might stand out a little bit more.
Very cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on today, Andrew, and sharing your kind of level of expertise. And yeah, love your wildlife photography. So glad you're able to do that. I mean, yeah, it's super awesome just getting to learn from you, and hopefully people are able to learn something from you too. So
no worries, man. It's been awesome to be back on, and looking forward to seeing the results. And as I said, the comments underneath, and hopefully a few people are agreeing with what we're saying. So at least we seem to agree with each other. So that's the start point.
Yeah, we'll see.
So I'm actually next month. I'm off to Antarctica next month to shoot. So I'm going to be going to like a penguin colony. So I'm super excited to shoot some penguins. So you'll be seeing maybe a vlog or two from there coming up. So keep your eyes peeled for that one.
Thanks you guys so much for watching. If you guys are interested in seeing how other pro wildlife photographers edit their photos, check out my video from last week in the end screen here to see their workflow and their process. If you liked the video, I'd be honored if you subscribe below, and I'll see you guys next time.